An intellectual carrot. The mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 172. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
We watched a divisive film, I would say, for this episode. Many of the reviews that I read said this is one of the worst science fiction movies ever made. And I'm like, that's a bold statement. That they place it into the same category as Plan 9 from Outer Space, which I said, okay, so you mean it's a decent film.
It's also a cult classic.
It's also considered a cult classic. It's Teenagers from Outer Space from 1959. Now, I'm going to start this by saying this is not a good movie. Plan 9's far better, but this is not a bad movie.
Okay. It's also the Gorgon Terror in UK.
Okay.
The Boy from Outer Space.
From where was that title from?
That it didn't say. And the Ray Gun Terror.
Oh, okay. I guess all those titles make sense, right?
And it's filmed in Bronson Canyon.
Yeah.
And Hollywood High School.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Did we see a high school?
I think that's what the steps are that we see.
Really? Okay. But I've ranted about this a bit on other reviews that people tend to shit on Plan 9 from Outer Space for no good reason.
How much money did he have for Planet 9 from Outer Space?
Plan 9 from Outer Space was like dirt cheap. The point is that budget isn't an issue if you have a competent filmmaker, if you have actors that know what they're doing, okay? And you have people that actually seemingly understand the material they're trying to do. Now, you can, again, make the argument that Ed Wood was an incompetent filmmaker. He wasn't. He was able to make a film, edit a film, produce a film that is entertaining. And that's what a movie is, right? It's the movies that are not entertaining at all, that you just have like this rage inside of you when you're watching it because
propaganda.
No one knows what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing.
Or the creeping terror.
Where it's padding, right? See, Ed Wood movies aren't padding, even though they might use stock footage, right? They're there to tell a story, a part of the story that Ed Wood couldn't film on his own. All right.
And this was only $20,000.
$20,000 in 1959. So just multiply it by, like, let's say 10 at the most. Okay. That the late 1950s is actually a little less than that. But so this was made for dirt cheap. Does it look like it's dirt cheap? Yep, it sure does. But the people that were involved seemingly actually cared, which means it's a step above what real Z-grade movies are. Okay? And I will die on this hill. Because while I do think this is not a good movie, this does not hit the Z-list terrible movie bottom of the barrel kind of stuff that some of the stuff that we've seen. By far, this does not reach that. Is it goofy? Yep. Is the dialogue awful? Yep. And I'll go into it after we're done talking about why the dialogue is terrible in this movie.
Is their monster?
Their monster is goofy as hell. And you know what? It still looked at least passable. I won't say it worked, but it was passable, right? And here's the thing as well. The concept for an alien invasion, hold on. It's an alien invasion movie. And normally I bitch constantly about alien invasion movies. This alien invasion, while still dumb, isn't as dumb as most reasons given. Okay? And I'll explain why. It still doesn't make sense, but it's not as dumb as we need water or we need women or we need men, or we need, whatever
Resources.
Yeah, it's not as dumb as that. It approaches it, but it's a step up. Let's put it that way. Now, I take notes for all of our films, and again, I'm going to try to give like a little peek behind the curtain here. I take notes for all of our films, and in some of the Godzilla movies that we've watched, I'm looking at my notes right now. I have about like a page and 3/4 worth of notes taken for a lot of these films. About a page and 3/4, a page and a half of notes. Some of the movies that we watch might get up to 2. And that's me either writing about like baffling crap that doesn't make sense, or me taking notes about airplanes that we're seeing. For a quote unquote Z grade movie, I have 2.5 pages of notes for this. And there wasn't a scene that I thought was tacked on that made no sense for being there. Does that make sense?
No, I will give them that. They every scene had its purpose.
Yeah, every scene had its purpose. There is constant information being given on screen in reasonable fashion. It isn't like there's suddenly just a dialogue dump where you have a person explaining to the camera what everything is happening, what is going on. It's explained in such a way as to make it feel a little more natural, but the dialogue itself still makes it feel very unnatural. Maybe we need to talk about this right away before we get into it.
Go ahead.
Before we get into the plot, the reason why the dialogue is awful in this movie is, unlike every single other film ever made by human beings that uses looped dialogue. Okay, so that means that when you're on set filming, there is no audio. They're not recording audio, right? You actually, every other film, they film the shot, and then after all the filming's done, the actors come back in and record their dialogue and sync up their performance to what they're seeing themselves do on screen. So you have the actors knowing what the scene's entire point is, why they're saying what they're saying. Like how if they're close together, you kind of whisper when you're saying it, but you don't know all these stage directions if you do it the other way. Now, so every other human-made movie does this. You film first, then record and loop your dialogue. This film did exactly the opposite. So they recorded all of the dialogue first without having like the idea of where they were in the scene, what the exact emotions were with the scene, what part of the movie it was in. And then when they went to film the scenes, they had to sync up their acting to what they recorded beforehand. So the result is this entire movie has this very dreamlike dialogue that is entirely disconnected from what you're seeing.
Not totally disconnected.
Not totally, but the emotions don't feel.
They
right.
don't. The feel of the emotions is not there.
Pacing is weird,
especially with some of these people that it felt like they were reading it.
Well, yeah, because they were reading it. They were reading all of their dialogue to record it first without having practiced any of it, because they hadn't gone through rehearsals for the scenes.
And most of these actors and actresses aren't
they're not known afterwards.
They're not known.
Most of them.
The one that plays Betty,
she became like a school teacher, and she's actually
she's one of the only ones that are
that's
a no name,
like absolutely no name. See, the guy that plays Grandpa, the grandfather, he was actually in quite a few movies. Okay, so I actually recognized him from Night of the Ghouls, which you should recognize Night of the Ghouls, Darlene, because it's an Ed Wood movie that we've watched.
Okay.
I recognized him from there, the grandpa, but he was also in like Sky King, which I watched with my father growing up, that was Sky King. Was like he flew his air. He's like, I think it's a Beechcraft. It's either a Beechcraft or a Cessna, and he'd fly it all over the West and
My
solve.
Fair Lady. Where the? Oh, he was uncredited.
He's a credit. But I mean, I remember him from Sky King and Death Valley Days, which everyone's in Death Valley Days. Everyone was in Sky King. Regardless, almost everyone's no name in this. But the thing is that no one's acting is really that awful when you put it in the context of how they recorded the dialogue. That they're having to learn to act and speak their dialogue the way they did in a completely disconnected way. So when I'm going through this movie and actually like saying, hey, this scene was really good, this scene was really good, imagine it with very, like everyone's had a slight lobotomy. Like everyone really doesn't understand English and they've learned the words by the noises. That's what it comes across. Like there's a few films that I've watched from the 1980s where like early 80s, late 70s, I think, where Jackie Chan didn't know English. And he learned his English lines by literally memorizing how the sounds to make. So it feels disconnected. It's that same kind of thing in this movie. So while I think that's the major stumbling block with this movie, in my opinion. You're just looking at me again. Do you agree?
I guess that's the problem. I didn't.
It has to be why people hate this movie, where I think it gives it a strange charm. Like it's just so weird.
It would have been interesting if they did this to only the aliens.
Oh yeah, that the aliens were the only ones that had this kind of strangely detached dialogue because they all know English. Oh, well, I'll get into this. Okay, because it doesn't make sense that they know English. All right. So let me start talking about the plot. We've already kind of talked about this.
Before we even got the credits, we see two people.
Yeah,
well, we see one person.
One person sitting at a telescope in an observatory, and I'm like,
and
okay,
a second
that's cool.
person comes up.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. But this first guy says he saw something falling to Earth that did not look like a meteor. It looked like something else. And he immediately is questioned by like the older astronomer that's there, like, no, you didn't see that. Come on. And the younger guy's like, no, it was probably a trick of the eye. And then I understood what kind of film we were getting into, like right away, because this younger astronomer waxes philosophical in a way that you would normally see in an Ed Wood film, where somebody's just kind of has this overly flowery dialogue that there's no real reason for it. He starts talking about like Earth's place in the universe and how we will be in for a shock when we truly discover where we sit, that we are nothing but a microbe in the cosmic sense. And I'm like, why in the hell are you saying this? In another movie or in another place in this movie, it truly might actually fit. But for just a random guy who does actually think it was a trick of the eye, that he's just been sitting at this telescope for too long and looking through it, and he just imagined this. Suddenly going into this long, kind of flowery, over-the-top speech about humanity's place in the universe is totally out of place. And it made me smile, because I had to pause it. I go, Darlene, we're in for it. Because this is either going to turn out to be a charming movie, like Ed Wood stuff, that has a lot of positive things to it. It's just there's a weird thing about dialogue, like, oh my god, Criswell's talking, so Criswell's just gonna spout babble, and it's gonna be amazing because it makes it's word salad, but because it's Criswell saying it, he has this kind of charm and sparkle in his eye. And I thought, okay, if this movie has it, this will be great. The thing is, this movie doesn't have it. It's just weird. So instead of me cackling with laughter, I'm just kind of watching the television screen going, what the hell's happening here? So anyway, we get to the credits, but only after we see the UFO touching down in a farmer's field. And you said it was a good special effect.
That was interesting.
Okay, it was interesting. What about it was interesting? Describe it to our listeners.
It looked like somebody had stuck a flying saucer on a parachute.
But the parachute was pointing down. And it was spinning like a top. Interesting, right? Like, it's different. Now, that being said, the flying saucer that's on the top is your classic Plan 9 from outer space flying saucer.
Yes.
Let's be fair.
Even when it's landed.
Which, to me, was a positive because I smiled with that. That made me smile. It's a classic doofy-looking flying saucer.
And the flying saucer is very thin.
Oh, yeah, okay? yeah.
Even when it's on the ground, it's very thin.
But they all fit into it, so it's a TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside than the outside.
And all it is this big, huge bubble that they... bubble.
5 guys pile out of this little saucer. Like, it's tiny. It's tiny, right? So it lands. So we see a dog running towards the saucer in the field. It's barking, it's howling, because who wouldn't be pissed off that a saucer landed in their field that they piss and poop in all the time? That's his field, by God. It isn't. We understand. We'll learn more about this dog later on.
Cocker Spaniel?
Yeah, something like that. It runs out toward the saucer, an alien comes out and hits it with a disintegration ray, making it immediately vaporize except for its bones, which just kind of fall to the ground. I'm like, okay, that's pretty gruesome, but that's okay. At least there's no blood. It didn't explode or anything. It was just like a flash of light and the bones fall to the ground. That's it. Okay, fair enough, right? There's only one sort of gruesome scene with that, I would say. And that's later in the pool. And that's just barely gruesome. Barely gruesome, okay? But all the aliens start piling out. They all look human. Very clearly human. They're just all young except for the captain of the spacecraft.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to, again, give credit where credit's due to this movie. We learn the names of every single one of these aliens. Not because they have name tags or anything like that. It's that the captain calls out each one of their names to give him, yeah, they're all men, specific orders.
I only got 4 of them, though.
Yeah, because the captain isn't named. He's just captain.
No, I have Captain, Sol, Derek, and Thor.
Morel.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I have Thor, Derek, Morel, and Sol, and then the captain. Now, you can tell it's a low budget movie because the equipment that they're unloading is a sound mixer, and it's very clearly labeled multi-channel mixer, and it has Roman numerals and all that, not Roman numerals, but you know what I mean, Arabic numerals and Romanesque
and
letters.
They bring out a cage.
Yeah, and they bring out a cage
with a
lobster in it.
A lobster.
Now this is called a gorgon or a gorgan. I always wrote it down as gorgon, okay, but I think they pronounce it gorgan. It's a gorgan, and the entire reason why they're here on Earth is they have been searching solar systems for planets to plant gorgans on so they can eat all of the life forms and grow to gigantic size, because they eat these things after they've gotten to like the size of skyscrapers. Okay, so here's my thing about alien invasions. Obviously, you have no need for it because if you are able to travel between stars, you have the ability to harvest whatever resources you need, right? So this is still dumb because if you need to have area for these things to roam, you can build domed areas for these things to roam and harvest them. Like that's not a big deal. But I guess for whatever reason, they need to have like a planetary environment to thrive. That means that these aliens are dumb because they can't figure out a different food source.
That was my thought.
An incredibly inefficient food source.
I could see it being a delicacy now, or something. But you get that out of the conversation. It's a very fascist.
Oh yeah, government. Yeah. They come from a world that has hands down a fascist dictatorship government that practices eugenics. And I was like, oh, holy crap. Not cool. And so they've likely bred out intelligence at this point.
Well, that really shows with Thor.
Well, yeah, because Thor is like a true believer. He doesn't ever question anything. It's just, no, this is the way things are. And even when presented with evidence completely to the contrary, he just doesn't care.
He actually even gets said that he was bred for his anger and destruction.
Yes. So these aliens, wherever they come from, are awful, awful people who likely have no real concept of how to actually deal with the technology at their fingertips, because they're breeding for hostility and aggression. They're only trying to go to other worlds to search for places where they can drop their food critters to grow and eat everything. The captain says that they don't want to go to planets that have people on them, but Earth clearly doesn't have people on them. Right? That's what he says at first. And then Derek picks up a dog tag from the dog's collar that they just vaporized, and it has writing on it.
Which is one of the things I wanted to inconsistency they have.
Okay.
Because the clothes are not on people, are not...
It's anything organic, and there's no synthetics that anyone's wearing.
But the dog tag itself
is metal.
But he has something else in his hands than the...
Yeah, I know. It's inconsistent. He does specifically say that the disintegrator only affects non-solid things, and I'm like, well, people are solid, but we're bags of mostly water, so I guess you can kind of go, fine, whatever. But like, people's swimsuits don't vaporize. Well, people's swimsuits vaporize, and they are solid. So what the hell is with that? So I have to think that it's like organic material rather than synthetic. I think that's probably what they're trying to do. Anyway, the point is that Derek shows the fact that there's like, hey, look, I don't understand what this writing says, but it's writing, and it's metal, it's refined metal, and it was on something on this animal that you killed. There are people here. Oh, this is nonsense. There are no people here, etc., etc. Now, again, we have to pause and say, you're in a spaceship.
You've done analyzation of the environment and that for your...
No, they haven't.
Well, they did, but they said that little bit of nitrate or whatever it was.
Because okay. Well, we need to explain this again then. Okay, because you're like, oh no, we tested the atmosphere. They clearly did not test the atmosphere, because the nitrogen in our atmosphere is not good for this creature to grow, according to them. Now the captain's like, oh, we have to abandon our plans. Let's leave, right? Here's the thing. The nitrogen is the primary component of our atmosphere. They clearly did not look at all to our planet to understand that 70-something% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. You're idiots. So when they observed our planet, not only did they not actually look at the thing that was most important, okay, they did not detect the fact that there's billions of people on the planet in a technological society sending out broadcasts
that has cities that would have city glow,
that have been doing nuclear testing, which would be incredibly obvious as well to an approaching spacecraft, because it supposedly took months and months to come here. The Earth's been under observation for a while. That's why they know that there is a planet here for colonization. Boy, I'm really griping about this movie, even when we haven't really gotten into the plot. The point is that the lobster thing dies, supposedly. Then Derek's like, good, I'm leaving, get the hell out. I have this book that talks about like what freedom really is, and I want to leave because I don't want to go back to a fascist dictator state. You are all evil pieces of crap. You would have killed everybody here. I have proof that you would have just killed everybody here. There's no people here. What's wrong with you? So, in my opinion, the captain, the only way to make this make sense is the captain knew that there was intelligent life on this planet and didn't care. That no one actually cared, or that they don't consider humans people, which plays into the whole fascist dictatorship, that these are just slime. What the hell's wrong with you? Which also adds into the whole what Thor does all through this entire movie. Because remember, Thor is supposed to represent exactly what the society is supposed to be. Hyper aggressive, basically just being hyper aggressive, judgmental, and immoral. That life is meaningless to him. He did not care about the dog that he killed, even when presented with the fact it was a life. This is a life. It might have been a minor life form, or it might not have been, aware of itself. It's just an animal, but it's still a life, and you didn't have the right to take it. And he's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Of course I did. Okay. So anyway, where am I in the plot?
You're with Sparky the dog is shot by Thor. And they all come out, and they got this lobster creature. It dies.
Derek is an idiot and gets suckered into losing the gun by like handing the book over to the captain, because the captain's like, I'm interested in that book that you are having.
And my first thought was, he's going to destroy the book because he's a goddamn fascist pig.
Well, I'm sure that book got burned later on because they're fascists. This is what fascists do: ban books that have knowledge in them or burn them. That doesn't pertain to your limited beliefs. Exactly. You burn and ban books that you don't want to have around. So your word, your law, what you believe is true will never be challenged. You can tell we are not about ban book. We don't believe in banning books in this house. Knowledge is free. Knowledge should be for everyone. And you know what? If you want to enforce your will on other people, you're a fascist. You present your point of view to other people and your argument.
And let them make the choices.
Because they're another person. Right? Okay, so Darlene's like, all right, let's get on. So he loses his gun, but he's able to escape. Thor fires the gun and destroys like a tree or something like that.
Because the captain knocks him.
Yeah.
Because the captain knows who
Derek is. It turns out that Derek is the son of their Das Fuhrer.
Yes.
Their leader, Das Fuhrer. Their leader. And he says he has to come back alive because he's the son of the leader. And this is where the Gorgon comes back to life, and they say, it was just stunned by all this nitrogen. Perhaps we can use this planet for a food source. I will chain up this Gorgon in Bronson Cave there and leave it here for further testing while we go back to our homeworld for more orders. Thor, I'm going to leave you here to go hunt down Derek and bring him back alive.
Which was a stupid thing, since Thor, all he'd want to do is kill him.
Thor doesn't give a about anybody. Thor just wants to kill. Thor is your Aryan white supremacist kind of character, where he's just, you will do this because you're not really a person. You're just you're there to either serve him or not. So where are we here? Derek makes it to the road and runs into town. And he
literally runs into town.
He like runs miles into town. Credit where credit's due. He runs miles. Like, Thor isn't about running. He ends up hijacking a car. Well, not really. A guy stops to pick him up on the road. Anyway, Derek ends up in town, and there's like a group of kids that just kind of stare at him, and he's staring back at them. He doesn't know how to talk to them or something. I don't know. But then he goes to a gas station.
You felt like he felt wonderful about the fact that there are little kids, though.
How did he feel wonderful? He had a scowl on his face.
Some reason it made me feel like
it's because the dialogue later on that he describes that his world, they don't know their brothers or sisters, that they're kind of raised on their own, and raised to be a part of society, and you're not just allowed to run around with other kids your age. Like, okay, I get that. So he's like confused that there's a whole bunch of children here.
Yeah, that's what I would get
it's confusion.
Confusion, not anger, but he's also slightly happy. That's what I got out of the music, maybe.
Okay, maybe. Because we can't link the dialogue with what's
or whatever.
happening.
It just felt like they were conveying that he was looking at these, and the kids were looking at him strange. But he was
baffled.
He was baffled, but happy about it.
So he goes to a gas station attendant, and we learn he does speak English. It wasn't that the aliens were speaking English to each other because it was a translation for us. They all speak English. Now, they are never said to have universal translators. He speaks English. He speaks English very well, which means they've been monitoring the transmissions from this planet to learn it, and it goes kind of against the whole idea that, oh, look, there's no intelligent life here. They have to have a universal translator. They have to. It's never explained, because I don't think they've ever even encountered other intelligent life forms, so why would they have them?
I don't know.
I know.
Maybe they've killed other life forms.
Maybe. But so he asked this gas station attendant about this strange metal disc that he has and the markings on it, because he can speak English, but he can't read it.
Which makes you think that it is a translator.
It must be. So the gas station attendant's like, oh yeah, that's Sparky. He's a dog that's owned by these people that live right down on whatever the address is that's on there. And it's like the Morgans, Betty Morgan and Grandpa. Okay. And there was a brother Bud, but we don't ever see him, do we?
No.
Okay, we don't see him, but there's a brother Bud that is mentioned a lot in this.
He's mentioned, and we'll get to that.
Yeah,
because that's part of the plot.
He goes, "Hey, look, they live right down the street there. It's like the fourth house on the left or whatever." And he's like, "Thank you." Thor goes into town with a guy that picks him up in a car, and Derek stops at this house, and Betty, a young woman, lets him in, thinking he's there to rent the room.
Because it says on the outside.
It says, room for rent. Right. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to pause in the movie here on the plot, because I'm going to, again, praise the movie. We get all the backstory we possibly need through Betty just being a chatterbox, talking about her history, why there's a room for rent, why she's kind of this younger girl. I guess she's in high school still. She's like a senior in high school. Why she's living with this old guy. We learned that her parents died when her and her brother were young, and Grandpa took them in
and raised
them. That Bud got married and got a job upstate, and therefore his room is empty. And in order for Grandpa to make ends meet, he needs to rent the room. And Betty's there to help Grandpa because she's staying behind to help Grandpa because Grandpa's getting old. And I wouldn't say that he is he's not like super sick. He gets around still, but Grandpa's clearly old at this point. So she's staying behind, and Bud left a whole bunch of stuff behind. So Derek comes in and he's like, I'm surprised you would let me rent, you would let me stay here. I don't have a job. And they're like, oh, Betty's like, oh, but I'm, you can get a job and we can take the rent when you do get a job. We understand that. Like, she's being really understanding. And Grandpa is actually a very kind man. And this is one of the better parts of the movie for me, because you're getting a lot of background that you normally wouldn't get in these 1950s and 60s sci-fi movies about the characters, that kind of give you why they are the way they are,
but
or
it
why
isn't
they're
quite
there.
spoon-fed.
It's not quite spoon-fed, because Derek's trying to understand things, because this culture is so different from his. He's like, why would you rent me your brother's room? Oh, because my brother moved out. He got married and got a job upstate.
And Derek is confused because nobody has parents in his world.
Nobody has parents, and nobody has siblings. They're not raised together. So it was very strange to him hearing about a brother and sister living together. Right?
Yes, it was very strange. And so she's babbling on, trying to make him comfortable.
But he's just confused.
And he's just confused because of his society.
His society is so different. And we learned that Joe, Betty's friend, Joe is a reporter for the local newspaper. He has been tasked with investigating what is it? A news story about a flying saucer being seen up at the observatory. Okay. And that they had plans to go swimming at their friend Alice Woodward. Her house. See, here's the thing. Again, even the minor characters, we actually know their names in this. Why? Because they're used in such a way as to bring them up in dialogue. And I don't know, we learn about these characters a bit.
Characters that you need. Well, we don't even have a name for the gas station attendant.
No, we don't, because we don't need to. He's not really, I mean, he's
He's
about
not
as
a-
important as Alice is, but I guess there's no reason to bring him up in dialogue about what his name is.
The person that picks him up in the floor, Thor in the car.
Oh, we don't know him?
We don't.
Okay, so the point is that if there's a reason to bring up their name in dialogue, it's taken here, and it's made in such a way as if Betty knows this person, then we are going to know their name because Betty knows their name. So she's like, oh,
Or if Derek knows their name.
we know it because Derek is always using people's names because they are strange to him, which is fine. That's fine. So Bob's like, hey, I know we had plans today to go swimming at Alice's, but I've been assigned this news story about a flying saucer, and I really have to go. This is my job. And Alice is like, no, I understand. That's okay. And she comes back in a little crestfallen, but says, hey, Gramps, can we borrow your car? And I can take Derek over to Alice and we can all go swimming together, because Derek's new in town and it'll be nice for him to get to know people. And he's like, sure, sweetie.
And she said Alice will be really taken with
Derek. Because Derek's handsome and Alice is flirty. I think that would be the best way to put it. She's not like overly forward. She's flirty.
She's flirty.
Okay. So
she does innuendos.
Does she? I don't think so. I think she just makes moon eyes at guys while she's in the pool. But
but it's not innuendos that you take seriously.
Yeah, it's more of just, it's flirting.
Yes.
It's flirting. We go back to the gas station guy, and we see Thor and the guy that picked him up pull into the gas station, and the gas station guy, he says, you're the second guy I've seen wearing these kinds of clothes today. And Thor's like, you SOB, you're going to tell me where this guy went because I'm looking for him.
He grabs him by the collar.
It goes from 0 to 60.
And we should explain the costumes that
they're like flight overalls that have masking tape on them for patterns.
Or the mechanics one, because they got pockets in the front.
It's like a mechanic's
But I will say I actually saw that it was the hairbone.
What do you mean?
Hairbone, the
herringbone.
Herringbone.
Proper words.
Okay.
Okay, so it's herringbone, but they literally just put masking tape on it to make patterns. Did you notice that they just wore socks over shoes for their boots?
Oh.
Those are socks with masking tape. Like low budget.
Then there's this metal collar or something around there.
Yeah, low budget means there's low budget things, but see, this is black and white. You're going to see it on a movie theater screen that's most likely slightly out of focus. You know what? Fine, absolutely fine. It works.
And on their legs and arms.
Yeah. See, if you made that as a costume today with like HD,
you'd get laughed out.
No, you'd be laughed out of everything.
You can actually see it in this one.
Yeah, you can, because we have a good copy of it. Strangely enough, believe it or not, folks, we have a copy of this from one of Mill Creek's 50 movie box sets. I think it's a 50 movie alien invasion 50 movie box set, and it was a perfectly good copy of it. Anyway,
because it went into public domain in 1987.
Because Warner Brothers didn't
want to renew it.
Why? See, this is what baffles me. This is not a bad movie.
You should also know what it was double featured with. You didn't allow me to say that.
Well, it was a Godzilla film. It was Godzilla Raids Again.
Giganticus, the fire monster.
Yeah, which is the American version of Godzilla Raids Again. The second Godzilla film. So this has like Anguirus with teenagers from outer space, right? Okay. So have we released the episode for Godzilla Raids Again? I'm sure we have at this point.
Well, it's
Darlene, you don't need to look it up. It's okay. So this gas station guy's like, I sent her down this. I sent this guy down the street. Just leave me alone, because like Thor's tearing into this guy,
Has
And
him lifted off his feet.
yeah, and then he like throws him to the ground, and he starts scrambling away. And Thor's like, "Okay, you're subhuman slime or whatever."
Shoots him.
Shoots him, turns him into a skeleton, vaporizes him, and then the guy that like gave him a ride, a nice guy that just picked him up in the middle of the freaking desert,
tries to run away.
tries to get away because this guy is going psycho, and vaporizes him in the freaking front seat.
And Thor takes out the bones, and
Like,
I
dumps
gotta
them on the
laugh.
ground.
I gotta laugh because you see it all.
Oh no, Darlene! Every time somebody's turned into a skeleton, it's clearly the same skeleton. It's
It's
always the same skeleton.
But you get to see the wires and the
Oh yeah, that it's all
pins
still
and
held
the.
together. Yeah.
It is definitely a skeleton that is used from a school that you got to name the bones.
Yeah, so we go back to Derek and Betty that stop at Alice's house, and it's like a huge mansion with a pool. When I say it's a huge mansion, it's a big home. It's really fancy looking. This would be like a $50 million home today in California, wherever they are, right? Like this would be easily a $50 million home.
A 500, maybe.
No. It's no, not that much. No, but Alice is like swimming around in the pool. She's kind of flirting, and Alice has the best way to describe her, because she's again another one of these unknown actresses that are in this film. The actress is Sonia Torgerson. She's in like what 6? She has 6 credits to her name, and this is kind of like her big thing that she did. The only other movie that she really was in was Daddy-O, but she has this kind of classic model look to her. That's the best way I can describe it.
She takes off her swimming cap.
Yeah, and she has luxurious kind of dirty blonde hair. That's what it looks like. It's black and white, but you can kind of tell, right? She's not a redhead. And she has like the perfectly penciled eyebrows on and painted lips. Like she looks like a 1950s pinup girl, right?
Okay, yes, I can give it.
And Betty has more of the
girl next door.
Girl next door is what I describe. She has like the girl next door, like you said. Oh my God, her bangs go on for days. Like
her bangs are just cut straight across the middle of the forehead.
They're both beautiful women, but they're beautiful in very different ways, which I thought was good.
It's
very 1950s.
Page style, but
she has long hair everywhere else. Anyway, Alice is sitting there flirting, and Betty ends up seeing Sparky's dog tag because Derek is trying to explain why he went to Betty's house to begin with. Okay, and Derek says that he explains that the people that he was with killed Sparky, and Betty is like completely. Again, the dialogue is strange here, but she's like, it feels like she's detached from the death of her pet dog. I mean, I guess I can't blame her. Her pet dog died that's been around for a long time, but she feels very like she's not really tore up about it. She's just in disbelief, but obviously the way they recorded the dialogue makes it even more disconnected. She's like, maybe we shouldn't go swimming. We really need to go, and I need to see where Sparky died. If you're telling the truth, I need to see where he died. And he's like, fine, whatever. We'll go out there. At this point, Thor is stopping at Betty's house, and he asks Gramps where Derek is. Because obviously Thor has this uniform on. Gramps knows. He's like, oh yeah, you guys are in the same unit or whatever. It's the Back to the Future thing. Why are you wearing a life preserver? It's the weird future clothes, right? That you're both wearing the same thing. Fine, whatever. You're both in the same unit. Great. Gramps served in the war. That's all I have to say. He said, like, Gramps is helpful. There's no reason why he shouldn't help. Oh, you're one of Derek's friends. Great. They went down to Alice's to go swimming,
which is down the street, the biggest house.
It's the biggest house in the neighborhood.
On the right or something like that.
You can't miss it. And he's just cheerful and happy to help one of Derek's friends because Derek seems like a nice guy, and Betty seems to be taken with him. So obviously Gramps is just happy to help. And I looked over and I said, by God, if he kills Gramps right now, I'm going to be pissed off because, like, Gramps, everybody that Thor kills in this is just kind of being nice or is scared of him. And I thought, like, killing the old guy who just has a smile on his face would have been like, that's just a little
Even
too
the
much.
dog was happy to.
I don't know. It pissed off that there's a big saucer that lands on
No, but it was wagging its tail happily.
Oh, sure.
I know you're used to our cat that wags its tail and then bites your hand off.
Yeah, I know. So Grandpa tells him exactly where he goes, and Derek tells. We go now out to where they landed in the field, and Derek tells Betty about the disintegrator array, and that's why there's only bones left. Because you're like, Derek, that doesn't make any sense. There's only bones here. They've been here for a long time. Like, again, the way they recorded the dialogue is just very strange.
Like it was the first reading.
It's, again, like you're watching somebody has learned English phonetically and doesn't understand what they're saying. That's what it comes across as.
No, it sounds like to me like if I was to, I'm worse than that with reading something out loud.
No, because you can't pronounce anything that you're reading, or you mispronounce it.
Anyway, it's kind of like that. Somebody that can read out loud is reading.
But again, it's just because of the way they recorded the dialogue
and there is
first.
Sometimes that it fits, and sometimes it just.
He tries to explain about where he comes from, but he's not able to do it because he thinks Betty won't understand. And I'm like, oh, God damn it, really? He then asks her, like, Betty, what's the most advanced form of transportation that you can think of? And she goes, well, that would be airplanes, of course. And he's like, Betty, how, where do airplanes take off from and go? And she goes, well, they take off from the airport and they go anywhere that they want in the world.
To another airport.
To another airport anywhere in the world. And he goes, oh, okay. And this is clearly him trying to see if there's any space travel on this planet, because they don't know what's going on Earth because no one's observed Earth, even though they should have been observing Earth. They're speaking English. God,
you're running around like
it hurts my head. It
stop it.
He then tells Betty that he hopes Betty will understand once she actually learns where he's from, and she kind of gives him doe eyes and then moves on. And I'm like, she can't be this dumb. She look, a girl from 1959 that's 18 years old would have said, this guy is either full of shit, and this is a pickup line. Yeah, he might be handsome, but it's a pickup line, and he's trying to convince me he's from outer space because he's wearing masking tape on a mechanic's uniform. Or this guy is a certified nut. That's
what I would have thought.
Because she can't be this naive. Okay? Like, okay, he's either from outer space or he's nut.
Aaron, keep going.
Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. I'm bitching way too much about this, but because it's not that bad. That's the thing.
You're ranting.
So Thor arrives at Alice's, and he demands to know where Derek and Betty went. Alice refuses and tries to swim away to call the police, and he vaporizes her in the pool, making the pool like smoke. Like they put dry ice in it and made it bubble, and the skeleton kind of falls to the bottom of the pool. So Joe, the reporter, ends up calling
with her without her cap that is rubber.
That's right. Joe calls Gramps to ask where Betty is, and tells Gramps that he stumbled into a double murder, being that there's two people that were killed at the gas station. They don't know who because there's only skeletons left. So Joe's like, my God, I'm like the reporter on the scene. Not only there are flying saucers, but there's now like this double murder with skeletons. Now he's the guy that finds Alice's body later too. Well, what's left of her in the bottom of the pool. And he's like, oh my God, there's a serial killer. But anyway, Thor stops again at Gramps' house, and Grandpa tells him he doesn't really know that Thor's a bad guy at this point. He doesn't really even have a clue. He's just a happy guy. He's like,
and he at the conversation between Grandpa and that as the
and Thor
and Joe,
yeah,
which is also the producer.
Okay.
He notices a note as Joe hangs up on him.
Okay, he notices a note, and it says, what does it say? We've gone out to Bronson Caves. Is that what it was?
Basically okay. That.
So anyway, Thor stops at the house, and Grandpa tells him that they went to the college. No, I wrote down that they're going to the college.
That's right.
Because they decided that they're going to go and talk to this scientist that is like, the head of the science department at the local college.
Professor
Simpson. Professor Simpson. And so Gramps tells him the entire thing, and Thor's kind of being a dick to him at this point. He's like, "You best be telling me the truth, old man." And okay, Gramps is like, "Fine, whatever. This guy's kind of a dick, but I'm whatever. Big deal. It's the 1950s." So
it's supposed to be small town.
Yeah, it's small town, but this guy Thor is clearly being a dick at this point. Like, he's not just from out of town, where like the first encounter with Gramps might be, oh, he's just not from around here and he doesn't know how we talk. It's no, he's being a dick at this point. But Gramps is kind of shrugs it off, because Gramps is a good guy. Tells him, oh, they went out to the college to talk to Professor Simpson. So Betty and Derek arrive at the college, and the professor isn't in his office, so they say they're going to go wait outside because it's a nice day outside, right?
And wait and see if his car's there.
Well, no, they do find out that his car is there, because he arrives
and goes to the front door instead of the back.
Yeah, goes to the front door instead of the back, and Thor arrives and basically goes, "Professor, you have talked to a man dressed in clothes like this. His name was Derek." And he's like, "Son, I don't know what you're talking about."
Because Derek is wearing...
I just got here. Well, no, because they haven't... Professor Simpson hasn't even seen them yet.
But Derek is in regular street clothes.
He's in regular human clothes now. So, which are the brother Bud's clothes that he left behind. See, that one scene really made a lot of this movie make sense, but Thor is pissed off because he thinks the professor is lying to him, so he vaporizes the professor and then climbs out the window out of the office and runs away. Derek and Betty come in after seeing the professor's car out in the parking lot. They're like, "Oh, we must have missed him. We're going to go in and see him now."
And the assistant
lets them in and then sees that there's a skeleton just laying at his desk. And so, oh, okay. So she calls the police. The secretary calls the police. And Thor stalks through Betty's house. And Grandpa at this point understands, well, crap, there's bad stuff going on. Because Betty also called Gramps really quick and said, "You need to get out. Thor's killing people." So Grandpa's trying to get away. But he grabs Grandpa and demands that he drives him downtown to where Betty and Derek are going. Because Betty and Derek said to Gramps that they're going to the police station, which is in City Hall. See, a lot of these details just in regular dialogue, but they're clearly said, even if they seem disconnected from the scene, we understand what's happening. We understand where everybody is and where everyone is going at all times. There is spatial relationships in this movie, which I am giving a positive thumbs up to. Because you don't feel like you don't know where the hell everybody is. Even though there's tons of scene changes in this, you know exactly where everyone is at all times. Which is crazy. Think about that. Anyway, everyone makes it to the police station, and we have a zap fight, which is Thor being a dick and vaporizing police officers.
And them shooting.
One of them has a Luger. One guy has a revolver, one guy has a Luger, one looks like he has like a 1911, a Colt 1911. And I'm like, that's just a very weird combination of firearms, folks. But you can what I think it was is that during the filming of this movie, they said, okay, everyone that's playing a cop, if you have your own sidearm, please bring it, so we don't have to like rent guns or buy guns, because that'll save on budget. So everyone just literally brought the guns that they brought back from the war.
And I laughed. There's a little sketch of when they fire them. There's a little marking on the film.
Yeah. They're not firing blanks at all. When they're firing them, it's just a sound effect, and they scratch the film for a frame. So you see this like scratch. It looks like a little tiny, like it's pew pew pew. Does it work? Yeah, actually, it's not bad. I'm not saying it works, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Two cops get killed, and then Thor gets shot, but he sneaks away. Now, inside a car, he hides inside a car, and Betty and Derek follow a trail of blood to the car. They're like, Betty's being a complete doofus with this. Derek, I think he went into this car. There's blood here. She like puts her fingers in it. And I thought, by God, she's going to like sniff it or smell if it really is blood. This is blood, Derek. And Thor leans out of the window, get in and drive me to a doctor. I'm like, okay, dude. And they drive him to a doctor. Like it's just like a regular country doctor. What's his Dr. Brandt. And Dr. Brandt's like, son, you've been shot twice. You need to go to a hospital. And he's like, I will kill you if you do not remove these bullets. Fine, come in. Because again, the dialogue feels completely disconnected. So he's brought in, and during the scene, he refuses anesthetic because he's like, I'm going to kill you if you try to run away on me, and I need to keep my wits about me. So Thor ends up telling Derek that the Gorgons are going to be raised here because they actually lived, and Derek is the son of the leader. Derek is inscrutable because, again, I don't think they really connect the dialogue with what's happening in the scene. It just feels like everything's recorded in isolation. So Derek's like, oh, I'm the son of our fascist leader that I have hated for my entire life and have been struggling against, and was willing to kill my entire crew to defeat his plans. I'm the son of that person. Huh. Okay. Moving on. Like, that's what it really felt like, right? But because Thor is a dick, and the doctor, while trying to help him, was not allowed to give him anesthetic, Thor's in a lot of pain.
And passes out.
Because of the pain, right? So the doctor, Derek, and Betty escape as Thor is delirious with pain.
And forget about the nurse coming in.
They forgot about the nurse, yeah. But he passes out of the front door, and then the nurse comes in and sees him and goes, oh, you poor child, I will help you, and takes him in.
And notices she's got to notice there were bullet holes.
Maybe because he hadn't been patched up yet, right? He hadn't had bandages.
She patches them out. She gives him a thing. But
she's a nurse. She's helping somebody. I'm okay with that. Like,
wouldn't you give him a sedative though for the pain?
No, because she didn't know if he'd already been given a sedative by the doctor. I understand that. Believe it or not.
And something about her giving him wake-up juice.
Doc Brown's wake up juice from Back to the Future 3.
No,
it's Tabasco and coffee.
It's what you called it that they gave me after the anesthesia.
Oh, the wake up juice? Yeah, because it was I referenced that because of Back to the Future 3. It's Doc Brown's wake up juice. Because after the anesthesia, you're just sitting there going, and they gave you like that shot, and you're like, oh, goddamn, let's go. Like, wake up juice. No, that's just a reflex action. It'll take a little bit longer for him to sober up. Because it did. You started throwing up halfway to the car. All right, anyway, back to the movie. That's just a reflex action. So where the hell am I?
Thor forces the nurse to get in her car.
And drive him to Bronson Caves where the Gorgon is. Yep. So we have Joe. Is it Joe? Yeah, it's
Joe is the reporter. Yeah, that's also the doggone.
Joe and one of the cops go to the cave, and the cop is killed by the Gorgon because they assume that like the weird crap that's been happening is coming from near this cave because that's where the flying saucer was, etc., etc. The nurse ends up being a brave nurse and jumps out of the car at one point.
In a chase.
In like a car chase between Thor and Betty and Derek. She jumps out of the car, and because Thor is delirious with pain still, and he has only been driving human vehicles for a little bit, he rolls this beautiful car down the side of Hollywood Hills.
But the nurse jumps out.
Yeah. And she's okay, but it was sped up to make it look faster, obviously. But I'm still the nurse. Good job. The nurse was like, "I've had it. I don't want to die." But it turns out Thor is still alive, and he's taken prisoner, and he's brought down to like City Hospital and put under guards by the cops for murdering cops. Now, how they're going to explain this in court that a spaceman disintegrated 2 fellow police officers with a ray gun that no one can find.
No one has found yet, and if it was something that tore apart and left only the calcium deposits of
that's
a
pretty
human,
effed up.
the military would be.
Yeah, I would think that at this point the military, because there's
the
news
military
reports
would
about it.
go through that like they do a crash.
Oh, dude, the Men in Black would be all over this.
I'm talking about not your.
No, I'm
Men in
talking
Black-
like the Mothman Men in Black, not like funny, haha Men in Black. We're talking about the
Okay,
real Men in Black.
I'm talking about what the government would have done, and I've been in the
You
in
were
the
Air
lineup,
Force, yeah.
for search and rescue, and we were the third group.
But they would have cordoned off the whole area.
Mm-hmm.
They would have searched it for anything crazy weird. But yeah, because this isn't something that's happened in like a couple days. Well, I mean, excuse me, a couple hours. This is over a few days, and there's news reports and newspaper articles on the front page of major newspapers about it.
But it's
And the
supposed
Air
to only
Force-
take place for a day.
It's more than that. It has to be more than that, because there's multiple newspapers that are shown with different headlines. So even if you say, oh, there's the late edition, there's like 2 different editions, like this is LA or whatever, and it has 2 different this is at least a couple days. This is 2 or 3 days. The Air Force would have been all over this like white on rice.
And it would have been all cordoned off.
Yeah. This everything would have been shut down, and they would have found the freaking Gorgon in the caves, being that even the reporter knew, with the limited stuff that he knew, that there was a damn monster in that cave.
Well, after it ate the cop.
After it eats the cop that we just got there. It eats the cop.
But I'm talking about the crash scene would have been cordoned off because there was a strange weapon, and they would have thought, okay, maybe this is Russia. Maybe this is USSR.
Yeah, this is the Soviets, and they sent like an agent over with like an experimental weapon or something. This is a national security
and it would have
issue.
been quarantined off.
But none of this is dealt with. Like the cops, there's like 2 surviving cops, and they're the only law enforcement or official people that are left in this movie. And I even write down, news reports even include information about the creature in the cave.
Okay.
Like, holy crap. All right, so Derek and Betty are searching for the dropped ray gun. All right. And it's at this point that Betty says, I think I have known since the first time we met where you really are from. You're from outer space. And I'm like, oh, God damn it, Betty. If this was delivered, if this was recorded like
and she
after
talks
the fact.
about that there's no crickets.
Oh, yeah, then there's no crickets. And then, oh, my. There's a giant monster that is looming over the entire area, and it's a giant lobster. It is the Gorgon. It has grown and gotten too big for the cave, and now is roaming the countryside, eating everything it can find. Okay? So, Derek tries the blaster because he sees the blaster right then that Thor had dropped in the crash. And he grabs it and starts going, Betty, it won't work. I don't understand why, So they run away. And the search party for the monster that was sent out, that is no longer in the cave, is completely wiped out. Yeah. There's like 6 or 7 guys with rifles. They're all wiped out. And the U.S. government is nowhere to be seen. Where are we here? So Derek finds out what's wrong with the disintegrator by taking it apart with like a hammer, a ball peen hammer. Did you notice that? It's a ball peen hammer and a screwdriver, because alien screws are going to use human screwdrivers, and a ball peen hammer for fine electronic work makes complete sense.
And it's a capacitor that.
No, it's a power source. It's the power source.
It's a capacitor that he pulls out.
Is it a capacitor? Okay,
yes,
fine.
It's a capacitor.
All right, Darlene's not talking towards the microphone. She says it's a capacitor. So he says, okay, it's broken, but it needs a power source. He says he's going to end up having to rig it up to power lines to blast the Gorgon, because that's the only thing that has the amount of power needed to power this thing. So he ends up going out. I'm trying to like think of where this is. They go out to the desert. The Gorgon's rampaging around. He climbs up the power pole and ends up having Betty use a fire telephone that would normally go to the fire department for like brush fires. This is California, to ask the power company to shut the power down because Derek is going to cut the power line so he can like weld them into his ray gun. And she is like the least convincing argument person there is. She's like, you have to believe me. There's no time to explain, but I need you to cut power to the entire Southern California. And he's like, okay, young lady, I believe you. I will do that right now. And this guy at the power station pulls a switch and shuts down the power to Southern California. And then Derek goes up with like a penknife and cuts the power lines down, pulls them down, and he plugs them into like both sides of the disintegrator ray. And he goes, Betty, you can tell them to turn the power back on. And she gets back on the phone. Okay, sir, you can turn the power back on now. And he goes, okay, I can do that. He switches the switch, and I guess it's exactly what he needs. So the Gorgon starts like slowly approaching, right? And he starts pulling the trigger. Nothing's happening. He goes, there's just not enough power. And Betty's like, sir, I need you to give us more power. And he's like, that's not how this works. I already have like all the switches thrown. And she's like, but you have to do something, otherwise we'll die. And this guy's like, he doesn't know Betty. He's just like a guy 200 miles away at a power station. And there's this crazy young girl yelling on the phone about monsters. And oh my God, this whole scene is so just weird. He goes, fine, I'll have to patch in another grid, and I hope that the power lines don't melt. And he just goes over and throws another knife switch, just
two others.
It's just another knife switch though. And I guess he links into like some other grids, and there's able to be enough power. So Derek ends up pulling the trigger and killing the Gorgon.
After dropping the wires.
Yeah, after the wires drop out of it, he's like, okay, I'm done. You know, I'm not going to kill myself on live power lines that I've gone up there and dealt with. So anyway, you'd think that this is the movie. It's not. It's not. Derek says that his people have returned because I guess he has like a weird sixth sense. He like can sense when others are near, because he looks up to the sky and says, they've returned. And he tells Betty that he knows what he has to do. He had promised her earlier that Earth was his world, that he wasn't ever going to leave, but he's acting like he is going to leave. So he drives off, leaving Betty in the desert. Oops. How does Betty get back? I forget. There's somebody out there. I just forget who.
It was Joe.
Was it Joe? Okay, yeah, it is Joe. It's Joe. Joe, he just drives off. So Betty starts telling everybody that he's from outer space. Betty is not committed. I don't understand this, because she sounds like she's crazy. She literally just shut off power to Southern California for like, I don't know, 30 seconds. There's a lot of issues dealing with that. And then she might have actually melted power lines by begging a guy to link in other grids, quote unquote. So it turns out that Derek gets back into his uniform, holds the reporter hostage, and demands to be taken to Thor. He grabs Thor at the cops at the hospital, basically acting like he's holding them up and acting like he has become the fascist Ubermensch. Like he is totally acting like he's bought into it. I don't understand why he's acting this way, but fine, whatever. There's a UFO that appears on radar, I guess. And now Betty and Grandpa go out to the field where Derek originally landed, and Derek, Thor, and the reporter arrive at the field. And now a UFO comes down and lands, right? Darlene?
Yes.
Okay. Turns out Das Fuhrer has arrived, and he is in the same kind of like mechanic's uniform, but it has a cape.
It has a cape.
And he says, I am your father. And Derek very clearly explains that you cannot be away from our planet for too long, because if you are long, people might think the government is weak and there will be a revolution. Okay, you're really telegraphing what you're trying to do, Derek. Because
yes,
Derek, all right. So the other ships in this invasion fleet that are bringing more of these Gorgons down are homing in on this radio guidance saucer. So he goes, I will guide them in, Father. I will prove that I'm the good son. He goes in and locks himself inside the saucer and gives the flying saucers that are coming in bad guidance, so they'll crash. And while Betty, Gramps, and Joe look on, all the flying saucers crash into the flying saucer on the ground, killing everybody there. But the only reason they survive is because they ran into Bronson Caves. The end. But there's like the image of Joe saying, I will never leave Earth, like half transparent in the sky as Betty like dreamily thinks about him. The end. I'm putting my notes away. Okay. This movie is crazy. It's crazy. Right, Darlene? What works? We've already said a few things that worked, but what works? What are your top things that work?
Well, I think he's really bringing up the fact that you really don't want a fascist government.
Oh yeah, this is very clearly anti-fascism as like a if this was a political movie, that's what it would be, right? This is anti-fascism, but it's not. It's a dumb alien monster movie type thing. It's just that this guy clearly hated fascists. Good for him. Right?
I don't blame him.
Don't blame him. Fascists deserve to be hated. Sorry if people out there might be angry with me saying that. You're kind of not the people we want listening to the show, but fascists are bad. Nazis are bad.
We wouldn't have podcasts like this if we had a fascist government.
That's right. So, screw them. They deserve to be hated and scorned. So, past that, what the message in the movie is fine, right? Like that political message is fine. I can get behind it. Great. What else works? Because Darlene, there's lots of things that do work.
It's got a neat little plot of chase the cat, I guess. Where
everyone's running around. Yeah,
everyone's running around
and just missing each other for most of the film. But every scene works. It makes sense why each scene is there.
Yes, you've already said that.
Yes, but that's like one of my top things in this, that it actually feels like this is a movie. This isn't like a whole bunch of scenes that people thought would be cool to put together and then string a bare bones plot between them, because we've seen movies like that.
Yes.
This is an actual movie.
I see films like that today.
Oh yeah, yes. We see
what
television shows like that today too.
What is that Squad one that is nothing more than the anti-superheroes?
What are you talking about?
Squad.
Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad. It's nothing more than a bunch of scenes.
Well, the first one is. Like the second one that they did is actually not bad at all. It's very good. But yeah, the first one was just, okay, that's weird. But this is, scenes make sense happening one after the other. The actual, like, and here's what's weird. The dialogue, because of the way they recorded it, none of it works. But if it was recorded in the normal way, where actors would have actually understood their motivations or positions or what was going on in each scene, and then recorded their dialogue, a lot of this dialogue probably would have worked. It just comes across as very detached. So I'm not sure. I want to say it works. The dialogue works, but I'm also going to put it in, it doesn't work. Because
and the love interest doesn't work either.
There's no chemistry. No, there's no chemistry because the dialogue is so detached. That's why. I think if it was recorded in a normal human way of proper actual movie making, I can't say for certain. But I have the feeling that it would have worked better. But as it is, there is no chemistry between them, between Betty and Derek. There just isn't. I believe that these are characters, though. That's the thing. Like, you care about Betty, what's going to happen to Betty. I cared about Gramps, right? I even cared about Joe the reporter. I didn't care about Thor, but at least I knew his name and motivations, because he was a fascist boot clicker. I understood what he was trying to do, why he was doing the awful things that he was doing, because these weren't people. So, I mean, if I had to say my top thing that works in this is the pacing. Even though this is an hour and a half movie, a lot of these sci-fi movies from the time are much shorter than this. They're like, hey, it's 70 minutes, so it's barely a theatrical movie. This is an hour and a half, and it doesn't drag. None of it drags. You're always engaged. I liked the sets, as goofy as some of them were. I liked the actors in this, even though they're all effectively no-name actors.
I didn't think the sets were goofy.
Some of them were. I didn't buy the doctor's office for whatever reason.
Okay,
I just didn't buy that. Gramps' house. Yes, that
That
looks
is
like
mostly a horrible
old
dog.
person from the 1950s house. That's
Oh my God!
see that was great.
And he hasn't changed his
wallpaper is state of the art circa 1895. Like it's fantastic. Everything else about this movie is it's so weird and low budget. It works in a strange way. What doesn't work? What are the top things that don't work?
Well,
the dialogue.
like you said, the dialogue.
It works and doesn't work at the same time. The costumes both work and don't work. Like they're fine for the 1950s and actually are very intelligent uses of existing clothes and props to make something look alien. But it's also clearly a mechanic's onesie with masking tape and socks over boots. So it works and doesn't work.
The lobster works and doesn't work.
Because the lobster is so weird, but it's composited in, and it's so weird that it's funny and actually kind of entertaining. So I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's great. But it's also composited in such a bad way that you're like, this is terrible.
Yes, and this animal
and it just screams. It just screams like a person going, ah!
It had to have been in pain sitting there with
no,
in the
because
middle
it was
of the
clearly
desert.
somebody like holding it on a stick, like with a like.
No,
they stabbed
I'm talking
it
about
like,
when it was in the cage.
Oh, when it was in the cage, it's a water tank. They just put salt water in it, and it's sitting out in the sun.
Poor thing.
I know I feel bad for it. I'm sure that animals were harmed in the making of this movie.
That's what I was gonna say.
But like the lobster, it's so weird. You're like, it can't be just a lobster. And I'm like, Darlene, it's a lobster. No, it has to be like a crawdad because crawdads are weirder than lobsters. I'm like, no, Darlene, it's a lobster. And they literally talk about putting on expandable retracting bands on its claws so it won't kill people. They talked about putting rubber bands on its claws.
Poor guy.
The aliens talked about putting rubber bands on its claws. Yeah, God, this movie is charming, baffling, awful, and amazing, all in equal amounts. That's what's weird about it. Like, this is not a Z grade movie. This is not one of the worst movies ever made. By far, this is not.
Yeah, my top of that one is my bottom of that is Creeping Terror.
Well, see, I would say Creeping Terror is bad, but the political propaganda movies are worse.
I don't count those as movies.
Terrible. There's some of these like Catwomen. That was pretty bad. Catwomen on the Moon. That was pretty bad. That was just exploitation or oh my God, like the Mars Needs Women. Like that was just really skeevy. This is well-intentioned and charming, and it just kind of fails because the people involved didn't know how to make movies properly, but yet they seemingly did know how to make movies because when you watch it, there's scenes where the camera is moving to follow a car and it's smooth and everything's in focus. Everything is paced well.
You didn't talk about the one thing they did good. You don't normally see it in these movies.
What is it?
They actually put a camera inside the
God, that shot?
Yeah, and it wasn't the only one.
Because, okay, so they're driving a car. It's Betty and Derek in a car. They're driving. And if I say it's a 1950s film, two people are driving and they're talking. And so how is this shot? You literally think, okay, they park a car in front of a rear projection, project them driving on this rear projection, and film through the front window. They did not do that.
They put the camera inside.
They put the camera inside the car and had Betty driving the car while talking, because this is clearly live. Like the way everything was moving and lit, the shadows were all moving properly for what was going on outside. This was clearly them driving down a street filming, and it looked good. It was so good it stood out.
So That's the first GoPro Pro.
Like that had to be a very small camera, or they popped the window out of the car and had a guy strapped to the hood of the car filming that. Like,
Wow.
really well done. Like, that's not something I would expect to see in a 1950s movie. It would be something I would expect to see maybe in the 80s.
Yeah, 80s.
Like that shot there was way ahead of time. Yeah. What else? What else can we say about this? I mean, we've been talking about, okay, so we've talked about classic movies for less than an hour. We've been talking about this movie, which people consider one of the worst movies ever made, for an hour, almost an hour and 20 minutes. Here's the thing. I'm going to recommend this movie.
Okay.
When I first stepped away from the television after we got done watching this, I was like, I don't think I can recommend this, because this is generally, the dialogue is so weird and disconnected that it's strange to watch. No, I think I'm going to recommend it. I'm going to recommend it, and if I gave it a 1 out of 10, I would give it a 5.5, maybe even a 6, because it's charming, it's weird, the dialogue totally works and totally doesn't work. Like, I think this would have been a 7 out of 10 if Ed Wood directed it.
Aaron, you and Ed Wood.
No,
Ed Wood.
If anyone else, okay, let's put it this way. If anyone else produced this, they would have said, we're not recording the audio first. We're going to film everything and then loop the audio afterwards. So all the actors understand what their motivations were.
Like I said, it would have been good for them to do just the aliens in
that weird dialogue. Yeah. That would have been great. So I'm recommending it. Darlene, what are you saying?
I'm saying I recommend it.
Oh, okay. We're both recommending it. Okay, because why?
Because I think it's a very charming film.
Okay. What would you give it out of 10? Like, I say,
probably a 6.
I mean, okay,
right,
folks,
above 5.
So
it's not. It's just above. It's just a little bit above average.
So we'll say, I mean, rounding between both of us, we're saying this is a 6 out of 10. We're both recommending it, and people are giving this one of the worst films ever made. It is not, right? Correct?
No, it's not the worst film.
It's not even anywhere close to being the worst film ever made. I'm shocked that people would even say that about this movie. Like, yeah, it has its faults, for sure.
I have seen the worst films made, that's in our century today.
In the 21st century.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we should leave it there. I know we've talked a long time about this. This is not a classic in many ways. Many people would just laugh about this film. I know that there was an MST3K of it.
And it's a cult.
It's a cult movie, for sure, because I think it takes a special kind of fan of science fiction to actually enjoy this movie. Which is us. We enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.